Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar on how to build a brand using public relations. Our presenter today is James Rothney, and I'll hand over to him in just a moment, but I just want to run you through a little bit of housekeeping just so the afternoon goes smoothly. That's our agenda, just 5 simple items on it, and if I had to elaborate on them, then I could tell you that the slides will be available on our SlideShare page, and the entire recording will be available on our YouTube channel, and we will send you links to both of these within the week. When the webinar finishes, there'll be a little survey that pops up, and I would ask please that you take a few minutes just to do the survey for us, because we really value your feedback. While James is talking, if you have any questions that you think of, you can type them in the question box, which you can see at the bottom of the control panel. And James will allocate some time at the end to answer your questions. And that's all I have to say. Thank you very much for being here, and I'll hand you over now to James.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, good afternoon, and a welcome from a very warm Dubai. Thanks for joining the webinar, and what I'm trying to do this afternoon is, as it says on the title, tell you how you can build a brand using public relations. So much of brand building, which takes so many years and so much effort, is often about spending millions of marketing dollars. There is perhaps an easier, more efficient, and certainly more cost-effective way of helping to build your brand, and that's using the power of public relations to help you do that. Now, well, I suppose to start off with, I need to perhaps justify to you how come it's me sitting in this webinar talking to you about building a brand through public relations. So a quick gallop through my career, starting from the picture top left. I worked for Disneyland Paris, the Disney theme park, from its opening, which was 1992. And that's really where I got a very good introduction to the power of a brand. If you work for a company which is known throughout the world, really, and which represents good quality and good fun, then doing business, especially on a public relations level, any group of people you're talking to, whether it's journalists or customers or staff or any stakeholders, they immediately know where you're coming from. So that was a great introduction to public relations and branding. Later on in the 1990s, along came little EasyJet, which at that stage was a startup airline. I don't know where all of you are listening to this webinar from. Some of you will have heard of the airline, I hope most of you, but it's a European airline, so if you're listening in from another part of the world, you may not have heard of EasyJet. It is now one of Europe's largest airlines. It's a business that operates 200 aircraft, more than 200 aircraft, and actually transports some 60 million passengers a year. So it's a giant business, but again, it's flying short distances. It's somewhat akin to an airborne bus. It flies very short distances just within Europe. So you're talking London to Scotland, London to Paris, London to Barcelona, and flights are really up to about 3 hours. And it's such a big company that it now interlinks various airports in Europe, not just out of the UK. It travels all over Europe. So that's a very, very large business. It's one airline which is listed in the FTSE 100. In other words, that's the London Stock Exchange, their 100 largest companies. So it's about the 60th biggest company in Britain. So a huge commercial success and a giant brand that got built along the way. After working for EasyJet, we then formed the Easy Group. Top right, you can see I've put easy.com. The intention of the Easy Group was to extend the brand we had created and bring it into a lot more goods and services. We ended up creating about 17 Easy branded businesses. from the Easy Group, and they ranged from, perhaps the more obvious, Easy car rental services. Having done flights, we thought we'd go into car rental. Easy Hotel, you can see in the middle, that was a fairly obvious brand extension, which again was, low-cost hotels aimed at people paying out of their own pocket. Again, bringing the brand values from one business to another. Bottom left of the screen, Easy Cruise, trying to revolutionize the cruising industry, which was all about keeping people at sea in great big boats, dancing and in the restaurant, the casino. This was a much smaller fleet of ships, which actually stayed in harbor overnight. So again, appealing not to the older age group, which was the classic market for cruising, but actually encouraging younger people to go cruising. And with the ship stopping in port every night, they could go ashore and move around. So trying to revolutionize that industry as well. Some other more recent and perhaps more surprising brand extensions. We even created Easy Pizza, a pizza delivery service. I mean, essentially, that was and is a branded search engine in a way. We had franchisees of our own who would create and deliver you pizzas, but it also works as a pizza search engine. If you're in the UK, you might be aware of it. If you need a takeaway meal, it's one way of accessing that. But what we were doing, we were extending the brand. We were actually de-risking the business as well. Something we discovered at EasyJet was that it's a huge risk business. I mean, it's very profitable, but you're operating very, very expensive assets in a risky environment. As we extended the brand, we started to license it and franchise it to other people and move into other industries as well. And, again, the thinking behind companies like Easy Pizza was, well, if everybody runs out of money, at least they might stay home and order a pizza. And another example of one of the companies we created, one of the brand extensions, bottom right of the picture, Easy Property. Again, trying to revolutionize some of the real estate market by taking it all online and, again, reducing prices to consumers. So that's really my my function at the Easy Group. I was the head of communications. I was the communications director, so that public relations and branding, corporate image, media relations, stakeholder communication, those all fell within my remit. So, that's really why I'm here trying to talk to you about how to build a brand through public relations. Let me try and move on to my next slide. Here we go. Just, bear with me for 5 minutes, because I think before we get into really creative and innovative ways of using public relations to build a brand, let's try and remember how to walk before we start running. Well, what is public relations? Public relations practice is the planned and sustained effort to establish and maintain goodwill and mutual understanding between an organization and its publics. And I've got that definition from the Institute of Public Relations. It's a 30-year-old definition and still stands the test of time. Please note, I've underlined that you have to plan it and you have to sustain your efforts. And what you're trying to do is establish and maintain goodwill and mutual understanding. All right, so public relations is not something done today and forgotten about tomorrow. It is a sustained effort to ultimately build your brand. And also another point to notice, I've put below the definition, we're talking about here goodwill and understanding. It doesn't have to be approval or popularity. So long as whoever you're targeting your messages at understands what you're doing and applies some goodwill to it, you don't have to be liked. It helps, but I mean, perhaps the tax man is a good example of that one. If he does his public relations correctly, you understand what he's on about, although you may not like him. Obviously, being liked is another major bonus as well. So that's what public relations is. Its definition. What functions does it fulfill? With whom are you communicating? With whom are you building a relationship? Top of the list, the consumer, the man or woman in the street paying for something out of their own pocket. Vital to have good public relations with them. Product communication, you may be communicating on behalf of a product in your company. In other words, a product might be a bottle of water, it might be a bar of soap, it might be a seat on an aircraft. You might be doing public relations for an individual product. You might, number 3 on the list, be doing it on a corporate level. Now that is communication on behalf of your entire organization, explaining business strategy, explaining expansion, explaining financial results, promoting the entire company, and indeed, being responsible too for promoting the brand, the look, the shape, the color of the company, the tone of voice it uses with other people, whether it's formal, informal, hierarchical, flat management system, all of those. And part of corporate communications is the next in the line, issues and crisis, what's coming up over the horizon. That's a vital part of corporate communication, knowing well in advance what to anticipate. And if you don't, you end up with a crisis, or sometimes crises are difficult to avoid and arrive on you. That's part of corporate communication. Next one on this, financial communications, talking to your shareholders, talking to the business media. Another one, talking to the government, explaining to them why certain laws may or may not advantage you, explaining them your business case. They're ultimately the people who control you, the people who give you a license to operate. So governmental public relations is very important. Below that, I've put internal communications. Very incredibly important, letting your own colleagues know what's going on and understanding it. If you've got a whole army of ambassadors working with you and for you, it makes your job enormously easier. And then also other forms of public relations. You can be talking to your business partners, people who supply your business, and indeed any other stakeholder group who may have some interest in your business, be they academics, agencies, so on and so forth. So that's really the functions of public relations. And again, finally, just to bring you up on the academic theory of public relations, if you're trying to plan a public relations campaign or program of any sort, you need to be able to follow a planning process. And I'm about to give you, real life examples of this. It all starts really with analysis. And here I've written you out a chart of the chronological order of the things you're doing when you're planning your public relations. Essentially, you can explain this in the simplest way to explain this. You need to start with analysis. Ask yourself, where am I now? The next question you ask yourself is, where do I want to be? Once you've decided where you want to be, then you need to ask yourself, well, who am I actually talking to? Who are the important people for me to talk to? Once you've established that, you say, well, then I know who I want to talk to. What do I want to say? That's your message. And then it comes down to strategy and tactics. Well, I've worked out who I want to talk to and what I'm going to say. In what way am I actually going to say it? Is this said verbally, in writing, with an action, with a photograph? And that comes right down to your strategy and tactics. During the course of this particular webinar, I'm not going to cover really the final 4 in the planning process, timescales, resources, evaluation, and review. I don't really have the time. Also, they tend to take place after the event. And what this webinar is about is about building a brand through public relations, not necessarily working out how much money you've got to do it and how you review it. That can come at a later date if needs be. So then, well, analysis. Let's put that into actual actions. How did we, when we were starting a low-cost airline back in the 1990s, we had to figure out how we might do this. All that we knew was that the industry had deregulated. Up until the 1990s, the only people allowed by law to fly between, shall we say, Britain and France would have been British Airways and Air France. It was controlled by them. Private companies were not allowed to compete in the industry. The law had changed, deregulation had just come in, the market was open for new entrants. So that was our first bit of analysis. The next bit of analysis, look at the photo on the left, the black and white one. Now that's Sir Freddie Laker. he founded SkyTrain. That was low-cost flights between the UK and America. And he set that up still in a regulated environment. He was flying chartered flights between the UK and America, so was actually technically allowed to do it. His business model was to fill a plane. If you fill a plane up, then you can charge much lower prices, and it worked very successfully for a time. I can remember 1980, I caught a flight to Miami for £50, which is somebody who I think had just left university. That was amazing. I couldn't have got across there unless the price had been that cheap. But the problem really was that he was operating a small number of aircraft over a long distance. So the slightest technical problem, any delays, customers were put off. Also, when you've just got a tiny fleet, I think what happened to Freddie, he got his flights were ring-fenced. In other words, very big, powerful carriers would put in a flight just after his and also just before it, and were able to charge lower prices on those flights so that the competing flights either side of his own were priced essentially to compete so heavily with him that it put him out of business. But we know, what we learned was from Sir Freddie was that there is a price elastic market. If you charge less money, people will fly more. We also noticed from him that it was a ruthless industry full of very powerful, very ruthless competitors. Also in our analysis, we look at that's a picture of a book on the right, Dirty Tricks, British Airways' Secret War Against Virgin Atlantic. And what happened there, again, Sir Richard Branson launching Virgin Atlantic, essentially accused British Airways of illegally gaining his data and stealing his customers. That was the nub of the argument. Took them to court. The case collapsed literally on the steps of the courtroom, or rather the case collapsed because British Airways agreed to settle out of court. There was no proof of guilt, but I think a big airline like British Airways chose not to go to court and to settle the matter without going through a court case. The outcome of that, Virgin Atlantic still survives today as a successful airline. The outcome of that was really, we noticed that, again, it was a completely ruthless industry, but that what we did notice was that Virgin Atlantic gained a huge amount of publicity out of this. Going to court with a big competitor was financially, in the end, quite advantageous. The other bit of analysis, in the middle, picture of the book Nuts, on the front cover, Herb Kelleher, that is about Southwest Airlines, the godfather of all low-cost airlines. America was a deregulated industry long before Europe. Southwest Airlines, probably about the biggest airline in the world. Again, flying just short-haul flights, point-to-point flights of, the States is big, so I think they fly flights of up to 5 hours, but, just flying from point to point in America. But, year-on-year growth and profitability. And the essence of that airline, firstly, they showed us a fabulous business model that we could copy in deregulated Europe. Secondly, they taught us a lot about corporate culture, how to take your job seriously whilst not taking yourself seriously. So armed with that analysis, we set off with a group with the objective of bringing low-cost flights to Europe with a group of messages which were really aimed then at our main public was the man in the street, anybody paying out of their own pocket, people not paying with corporate credit cards. And time again, we repeated the same messages to people. Remember, many of you listening may not remember, back in the 1990s, if you wanted a flight, you would go to a travel agent who would book you a seat on a flight. It is the travel agent who would give you all the information about the price, the availability. Heaven knows if the travel agent was selling you the best value seat or the one he could get the most commission off. Anyway, understanding how airlines price themselves was pretty unfathomable. In other words, a price would be charged. Maybe if you waited till the last minute, you would get it cheap. Maybe the flight would be full. So very, very difficult for the man in the street, the consumer back home to realize what the pricing was about. Well, we set off to create a very informal airline. I mean, look, you can see from the pictures I put on there, bright orange is our corporate color. This was when, most airlines had the national flag or the royal emblem, even in the case of British Airways, on their aircraft. This was a bright orange airline, really noticeable. We were low cost. In other words, the whole idea was we'll charge you a much lower price, provided we can fill the aircraft. And indeed, other ways we eliminated cost out of the business. Again, messages repeated in every press release, every conference, every meeting, every bit of publication that we produced. We were a direct sell airline. You had to come direct to us. That's the only way we could make it cheaper than to you, rather than spending money on tickets and travel agent commission. You had to come to us. So, we did things, again, very powerful public relations exercise. We'd write our telephone number down the side of the aircraft. Unheard of stuff in those days. Again, I don't suppose for a moment we thought people would come running out of their house to write down a phone number as the plane flew overhead. But the subliminal message all the time to people was, why is a phone number written down the side of the aircraft? Well, it's because you've got to contact them direct. And photo on the left, the founder of the airline, Greek entrepreneur called Stelios. He was 28 when he started the airline EasyJet. And that aircraft has a Luton telephone number written down it. Luton is a town outside London in England where we originally started operations. On the right is another one of our older aircraft at the time, back from the 1990s, with a national rate telephone number on it, 0990. That was a national rate call number. And again, we used 29, 29, 29, because at the time our advertising slogan was, fly for the price of a pair of jeans. And in those days, a pair of Levi 501s cost £29. So that was part of our public relations message throughout the time. And again, constantly telling people, well, hang on, it is low cost. How do we make it low cost? Not only are we direct sell and ticketless, but we've only got one class of seat. In other words, EasyJet didn't and still does not offer business class. It's like an airborne bus. You get on board and sit down. And there's no free lunch either. In other words, if you want a cup of coffee, you pay for it. But the advantage of being just one class of seat as well is that in exactly the same size aircraft as some of our bigger competitors who use business class, they could only physically get 107 seats inside the aircraft. We could get 148 by taking out the curtain, taking out the business class, taking out the food galleys, because we didn't offer, well, food, as I say, it was more like coffee, tea, crisps, sandwiches, maybe, but no more than that. And again, constant message, very good for building our brand then. We really made a big point of saying, listen, we are fair and transparent. The whole basis of the low-cost airlines, EasyJet included, is that if you book in advance, you pay less. So if you want the convenience of flying at the last minute, you'll pay more for it, which, as time moved on, the business passenger was more prepared to do. But that was the fairness of it. The transparency as well. Again, it may seem perfectly ordinary to you now, but by the time we launched a website, to put all your prices up there, your inventory, so people could choose whether to fly on a Monday or a Tuesday according to the price, that was unheard of stuff, and was hugely useful in building a brand. Offering something at a much lower price to consumers and explaining to them how it was done proved massively successful, and was one of the main engines of growth in the big EasyJet success story. One of our other key messages and one of our other key brand building tools in public relations was taking on the big boys. We were in an industry dominated by huge, often nationalized industries with a lot of financial muscle. At that stage, many, many more aircraft than us. So quite daringly, as a brand building exercise and as a public relations tool, we decided to take them on. I suppose we should start off at some stage. I mean, once we were a small airline, British Airways showed some interest in us. They said, well, actually, it looks like your business model may work. They showed some interest in purchasing our airline. The deal didn't go through. The message at the time from British Airways is that they didn't think they'd get regulatory approval for for actually purchasing us, and they declined to pursue negotiations. In the event, a short time later, they decided to launch their own low-cost airline using exactly the same kind of aircraft, exactly the same kind of business model, ticketless, direct sell, one class, no free lunch. And at the time, it was terrifying is actually not too strong a word. I mean, me as a much younger guy, I thought, oh dear, I'm going to be out of a job in a few months. This is and having just moved back from Paris to the UK to take up this job, it was truly upsetting. So we thought, right, let's take on this competitor. We're fighting for our survival. So by that stage, we had moved from using the telephone to using online distribution. Again, it may seem second nature to you listening in to book an airline seat online. Nobody was doing it at the time. We got a booking engine, and instead of painting the phone number down the side of our aircraft, we painted the website. Again, constant message of people, we are direct sell. Also, since British Airways at that stage of their career were calling themselves the world's favorite airline, we used strapline for our airline as the web's favorite airline. We were determined to start taking them on. We took the fight even further. The British Airways low-cost carrier at the time was called Go, and you can see, firstly, look at what's written down the side of this aircraft. Stop British Airways. Stop Go was our message. This is, again, a good example of internal communication. All of us dressed in our orange suits, our corporate color. This is us flying over to Brussels to stage a demonstration outside the offices of the European Commission. Our complaint is that British Airways, as a dominant carrier, was abusing its dominant position by entering the low-cost market. I won't get into complex legalities in the short space of time we've got, but we said, right, these guys are going to put us out of business. We must take them on in every single way we can. And we started a lawsuit against them that they were deliberately going to put us out of business. This was anti-competitive law. Anti-competition laws are pretty strong in Europe, for those of you who are listening in from other parts of the world. So, again, I suppose what we learned from this, or what we kind of were hoping for and what we achieved, was huge publicity. The world's media were, by virtue of the fact that we had taken on a brand and a name which were globally known, suddenly they noticed, little EasyJet, our name became known far and wide because we were taking on one of our main competitors. The other really good, almost coincidental bit of public relations brand building that happened here. It was at this stage, when we were a 4-year-old airline, something like that, that suddenly we noticed we were picking up the business passengers. To begin with, at EasyJet, everyone thought, oh, it's some kind of cheap airline. It's okay for students and backpackers, but we were still putting out the messages of how we could make prices much lower. I'm not sure we had gained too much trust. It was only when British Airways got into the same game as us, suddenly people said, well, wait a minute. Obviously, this is a business model that works. If a flag-carrying major airline is prepared to launch a low-cost airline, then there must be something in it. And we saw, business passengers shooting up in numbers. And really, the publicity of our battle with British Airways was giving us was really helping with sales numbers as well. Now, funny how life goes. Strange in the end that after EasyJet became a publicly listed company on the London Stock Exchange in the year 2000. Shortly after, actually purchased Go, the airline, which British Airways had sold on to a venture capitalist. EasyJet, with the funds from its flotation, actually managed to buy Go. So, and a fairly straightforward thing to do, because in the sense that they were operating exactly the same business model. So their aircraft there and their standards matched very well. The airline was in the end swallowed up by EasyJet. So, in that sense, battle over. And I think, times move on as well. British Airways has moved on to become part of the International Airlines Group, and now run highly profitable long-haul flying. They're much more focused on flying people from London to New York or London to Tokyo than they are short distances. But it was a huge relief to be able to use public relations for building our brand. I can remember at one stage, just before the battle with British Airways begun, my boss came into me, the entrepreneur who started the airline, and he said, well, we've just spent £5 million. In those days, for a small airline, that was a huge amount of money. We've just spent £5 million on an advertising campaign. Then we've done a brand awareness survey by telephone, calling people up and basically saying, have you heard of EasyJet? Nobody had yet heard of us. I mean, the brand recognition results were appalling, especially having spent that kind of money on an advertising campaign. So, he said to me, we need to build a brand through public relations. We can't do it through advertising money. Well, we'd already started the fight. He said that to me just before we started the fight with British Airways. The other really, really useful way that we built a brand through public relations was with TV. I was sitting at my desk one day, and a producer from a TV company called me up and said, we would like to make a reality show about your airline. This is, what in England is called a docu-soap, halfway between documentary, halfway between soap opera. And they're in essence, their TV crews followed around our staff and our passengers in our airports and in their destinations, telling true life stories of, wonderful stories of people going abroad to sunny beaches to have a holiday, people going on honeymoons, but as well, it was a warts and all TV program. They showed reality. So if somebody was delayed or missed a flight, they would show angry people at check-in desks. It's difficult to tell from a still photo, but you can see bottom right, there's somebody giving check-in staff a bad time about something. So this, again, was unheard of at the time. It makes great TV. People in opposing situations, controversy makes good TV. So for every wonderful TV program they made, or one episode they made about somebody flying off to a sunny beach, there would also be lots of angry passengers who had missed their flight, whose flights were snowed in. If there was a technical issue with any of the aircraft, they would show that. So again, it was, people all said to us, how did you dare do something like that? How can you, dare show people having unfortunate incidences as well? Well, the honest truth of it was that, provided we were shown to be trying to do our best, if an airport is snowed in, you've got an awful lot of trouble flying your aircraft there. It's not your fault. You may get the blame, but if an airport in another country is snowed in, then there's not a lot you can do about it. Anyway, the TV crews came along, made the TV program. The amazing thing about this, that the airline TV series going out on national television at prime time, I think it was 7:30 in the evening, they made 9 whole series of it. So we started off this TV series when we were a very small airline struggling for money. It was a no-brainer for us. It was a wonderful way of explaining to people, A, giving us brand exposure, but B, explaining to people you have to contact us direct. That was one of the strongest tools of the TV series, that, this was a direct sell airline. What was interesting about it was that even long after flotation, long after EasyJet became a really well-known and recognized brand, they were still making this TV series. In total, between 1996 and 2006, in 7 years, they made 9 series and showed 118 episodes of this TV program. Again, one of the most effective ways that I can think of that I've seen in terms of building a pan-European brand. It may not be a global brand yet, but certainly we are known by, well, we've got 60 million people a year flying with the airline over Europe, so it's extremely well known. And if you want to watch what real, true reality TV is about, go onto YouTube, have a look at one of the points of the airline series. So again, another couple of examples of fabulous brand building using public relations alone. We didn't pay the TV company to make this. This was free publicity. The downside, of course, is, like most of public relations, you don't have editorial control. We couldn't control what they did and didn't put in the program. So it was truly warts and all, but helped us grow the airline year after year. Again, I think credit is due particularly to the Virgin Group. We at the Easy Group, stretching our brand from one business to another. Many thanks really to the Virgin Group, who did the same thing. Started off with Virgin Records and launched Virgin Atlantic, the airline, highly successful global carrier. And they've got some other wonderful, powerful, fun, clever, cheeky brands. Virgin Trains, now a major success in the UK, as is Virgin Media, which will give you broadband and TV and phones. That's sort of a national success now. And again, built up, as I say, with cheeky, fun public relations. Couldn't resist putting in a photograph of Sir Richard Branson wearing a red wedding dress. Again, this was to launch his business, Virgin Brides, which was a wedding outfitters. And we've learned a lot from them. Another company who have successfully used branding or public relations, particularly, to build very successful brands. These aren't just UK-centric achievements. There's plenty of examples of Middle Eastern companies too who are building good brands with public relations. The UAE Exchange, for example, the top left here in this slide, that's actually your largest retail remittance network in the world. Remittance network is sent one person sending money to another. They're handling up to 6% of the total volume of global remittances over 31 countries. So, and it's great to see over in the United Arab Emirates, there's so many immigrant workers here that a brand which is building integrity and trust through word-of-mouth communications is great to see people using public relations and branding over here as they develop a whole sort of holistic range of financial supermarkets. Joya Lucas, the world's favorite jeweler, great strapline, they too been very successful building a brand in the Middle East and beyond. They started in Abu Dhabi in, I think, 1987, now 91 showrooms across the world. And they do great PR, in-store activities, and a great sense of corporate social responsibility. A nominal amount is paid by each of their staff members towards charity, which is matched by Mr. Joy Alukas himself. That's raising millions of dirhams over in the United Arab Emirates to help worthy causes. They've also launched the Joy Alukas Think Pink, which is a mass media breast cancer awareness initiative, and a blood donors forum, encouraging their own staff to give blood. So, good brand building, good public relations there. Dubai duty free, hard to pick up a magazine in this part of the world without Dubai duty free being showcased. And again, fits in beautifully with brand Dubai. Shopping is such an important part of the Dubai experience. This public relations message is redoubled at the airport, and they won best airport duty-free operator of the year as early as 1985. So Dubai understood the sense of value for money, quality of products, range of products, quality of service, and sort of the ambience, the sales ambience. They tuned into that straight away, and they're a reinforced brand Dubai very well with public relations. More straightforward, industries. Al Rauda. I mean, they are basically, this is, bottom left now. Excuse my appalling Arabic pronunciation. That actually means lush garden in Arabic, or my interpretation of it. But these people are the largest producer of fresh chicken and processed meat in the Emirates. And they've built a brand on a constant PR message. I mean, again, you look at the picture. It shows in the brand picture. They only have cage-free chickens who are fed with 100% natural feed, and this is, their constant. I picked this up from their PR messages. They don't use growth hormones in their chickens. They don't use antibiotics. They have a real concern for the environment, and obviously their protection of animal welfare is at the forefront of their chicken rearing business. They've also got a wonderful PR message of freshness redefined. I think in parts of the world where you've got temperatures like we've got here at the moment in Dubai, often to freeze some meat is actually the freshest way of preserving it. In the middle there, Aswak is, a pioneering concept in the world of modern day shopping, and it's great to see local operators getting into the supermarket business, which is so dominated by huge multinational players. I think their key distinguishing feature that sets it apart from their competitors is they've got a personal flair of authentic, traditional, and open street market feel about them. They're not glass towers of commerce. They actually look quite Middle Eastern as well, although they're entering the business which is so dominated by other players. And finally, another admirable business, I think, in this part of the world, ADNOC, the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company for distribution. They've got their branding is great, using the falcon's head, an animal which stands for alertness, responsiveness, integrity, confidence, using the blue color, which represents the blue sky and the vastness of the blue ocean. Good public relations, good branding there rather, and good public relations as well. They're now in such an oil-rich community. ADNOC are now getting into green petrol stations, which are ecologically friendly buildings. The actual construction of the buildings are meant to minimize any waste and any damage to the environment, and they're starting to fuel gas-powered cars as well. So good to see a big player actually, who thrives off oil, actually managing to get into alternative fuel sorts. So hats off to some good brands and good public relations in this part of the world. In summary then, really, I hope that's given you some help and some idea about building a brand through public relations. In short, if you want to do it, find out where you are now, decide where you want to be, and then articulate what you want to say to whoever is your suitable public. Deliver your message, and when you're delivering your message, try, as well as the formal communications that we all indulge in as PR people, try and be brave, innovative, and unique. Think what makes you exceptional, what's specific about your company, and see if you can win over your audiences in that way. So I think I've gone on for long enough. Thanks so much for joining me. Do by all means send through some questions. I'll be happy to answer them. And, we'll look forward to perhaps meeting once more. Let me just check out if we've got any questions. Here we go. Oh, here's a question for us. Yeah, well, okay, this is a good one. I would have trouble getting my boss to dress up in any way. What can I do? Yeah, fair enough. I mean, maybe that might be coming from certainly in this part of the world. I think the Middle East, behaving like that would be truly extraordinary. I think, the point here is if you can identify an issue where you can give your customers a better deal, then don't be frightened of shouting about it. Consumers, customers, anyone who's paying you money will be delighted to hear if you end up picking a fight with, if it's not picking a fight with a competitor, then it will be, you could be picking a fight with the way the industry does business. If you are innovative and if you are unique, don't hesitate to shout about it. Doesn't mean necessarily you have to dress up. You can create slogans. You can dress up your property rather than your people. But don't be frightened of explaining you've invented a way of giving a better deal. Just see if we've got some other questions coming. Oh, incidentally, something I should mention to you as well. If you're interested in learning more about public relations, then I'm back out in Dubai, both at the end of August and at the end of October, 25th to 28th of October. If you want to join one of my public relations courses where I can go into much greater detail about what I'm talking about, then by all means do get in touch with Informa, and they will look, can book you onto one of the courses. It'd be great to see you. Here we go. Here comes another question. How do you recover from bad PR or a situation where you haven't handled things well? I mean, yeah, hopefully, this is an indirect answer. If your analysis is good in the first place, you shouldn't end up with bad PR. There's, also the people that say there's no such thing as bad PR, but it can happen from time to time. I mean, certainly there's no harm in going back and saying, well, in the light of the discussion and what we've learned we listened to our customers, we probably got this wrong. We've now decided to change our policy. And at the end of the day, if you have to apologize, then you can apologize. If you genuinely have made a mistake, it's much better to hold your hand up and say, sorry, made a mistake, I apologize, and we will change our ways as a result of what we discovered. So, but give it good thought. You often there's a good reason why things have got wrong. But if you have got it wrong, hold your hands up and say you've made a mistake. Another question here coming in. What are the most important functions of public relations? That kind of depends on the industry in which you operate. If you're calling in now from a cement factory, then probably business to business communications with your partners are the most important ones. Certainly in my experience, and certainly if you're working in consumer-facing industries, well, as you've just seen from the webinar I've delivered, media relations is vitally important, and so is corporate communications, communicating on behalf of your brand, communicating on behalf of your company and its business strategy. So media relations, corporate communications in that order, and then internal communications. If everybody inside your business is singing from the same hymn sheet and supporting the same cause, then as I say, there's a whole army of ambassadors representing your brand is a really good thing to have. So I think we've probably gone on long enough. Many of you have at the end of a long working day. Thanks so much for joining me on this webinar. I hope it was useful, and please join me in Dubai later this year for one of my courses on public relations if that's going to be of help to you. In the meantime, thank you and goodbye.